G'day guys and welcome back to the Vema Trader So You Want to Be a Scalper series. My name is Reese and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you guys about position sizing and leverage. They are two of the things that really do contribute to worse performance while scalping. Liquidation especially, right? Liquidation when you're at max leverage can be absolutely disastrous. I'll talk about that later in this video. So what we'll do is we'll head to Vema Trader and we'll get started.
Righto, so one of the other big issues that makes scalping a bit harder, it carries a bit more risk than swing trading or other time frame trading, is to do with the position sizing. So if you're swing trading or you're trading higher time frames, you might have a stop loss somewhere between 1 and 5%. It could be more depending on the contract, depending on how you trade, but it's usually going to be somewhere in that ballpark. Now we can see that if I have a 2.5% stop loss on this trade, I'm going to have a position size of 20. On OKX's BTC USDT swap contract, each contract is worth 0.1 Bitcoin. Now we can find that here on this position tiers page. You can see just here, face value, one contract, 0.1 Bitcoin. So what that means is my position size of 20 means I'm actually trading 0.2 Bitcoin, right? 20 times that 0.1. If, however, I am scalping and I'm using a small stop loss like 0.25, often when scalping you'll even have even smaller, it could be 0.05, but just to keep the maths easy, that gives me a position size of 200, which means I'm actually trading with 2 Bitcoin now. So before, I was trading with about $4,000, right? If this trade was to enter at 20,000, which it would at the moment, that's a position size of about $4,000 on that higher time frame trade with a 2.5% stop loss. But now that we've come down, we're scalping and we're using that 0.25% stop loss. That is a $200 contract position, which is worth about 40 grand. So you can see it pretty quickly scales up the position size that you are trading with. Now, what that can mean is that you're more likely to see slippage because if your stop loss is hit, or even when you're entering, there has to be 200 contracts in the book. So it has to go through the book to find those 200 contracts, which means you might cop slippage on your entry or on your stop loss. So with the position sizing comes leverage. So we can see if we look at that same scalp trade, we've got the 2.5% stop loss. We're using leverage of about 16x. Now, some of you guys have asked about how we do our leverage calculations. To make a really long story short, we have a calculator built to do them. What that calculator does is it takes a look at this MMR value and the IMR value and a bunch of other things, because these are what actually tell us where OKX is going to put your liquidation price based on your entry. And so we take those calculations into account, then we add a buffer on, right? Because we want to protect you guys from liquidation, so we add a bit of a buffer. So say that the calculator spit out, 20x, we might go with 16x to give it just that little bit of a buffer, meaning you're less likely to get liquidated. What that actually means is that your liquidation price should fall well outside of your stop loss. And some of you will have gotten the emails because we send an alert, right? If your liquidation falls within 30% of your stop loss, so say on a 1% stop loss, if your liquidation price comes to within 1.3% of your entry, we will send you emails, we will show that liquidation price on the chart. And if you ever want to check your liquidation price, we do always show it when you are on the review screen, right? When you're in an open position, we actually check the exchange for your liquidation price, and then we keep that on the review screen updated every single minute. So we really want to protect you guys from liquidation, and that's how we try and do it with our liquidation buffer. Now, as a general rule, right, it's always going to be a little bit different, but as a general rule, what our liquidation buffer does is it means that your stop loss will be a 40% loss of margin. So if you were in a trade for $100, your stop loss would be about a $40 loss, right? And that $40 loss would be, whatever 1% of your account is. So it's not always going to be $40. But whatever 1% of your account is should be about that, and you will have about 2.5 times the margin. So what that means is if there is a highly volatile event or something that does cause a liquidation, you will lose about 2.5 times what you wanted to risk. Right? Because you wanted to risk 1.5%, you essentially have, you wanted to risk 1% of your account. In fact, let's start a new text box. You wanted to risk 1%. The margin required will usually be somewhere around 2.5% of your account. So worst case, you lose 2.5%, right? If you get liquidated because of a highly volatile move or whatever the case is, you're looking at about 2.5%. So obviously it is worse than losing 1%, but it's not awful, right? 2.5% is a manageable loss. One of the problems with scalping, in fact, probably one of the biggest problems, is that, let's just move things around so this is a bit cleaner, is that when you max out your leverage, which you can do, so if we go back to the 0.25% stop loss, you will see my leverage has gone up to 125x. Now that is actually OKX's max. When you hit max leverage, so on this contract it's 125, on other contracts it might be 100, on some of the BitMEX ones it's about 33.33. When you hit max leverage, the only way to get the correct position size for your account risk is to increase the margin, because you can no longer increase the leverage. You've hit the max that the exchange will allow. So what that actually means is that all of a sudden, this ratio falls out. Where before you were risking 1.5% and the margin was about 2.5%, you might still be risking 1% at your stop loss, but the margin to do so, to make that position size, might be, let's say 10%, right? And it can get that high. I've seen it as high as 13%. Because this guy was using such a small stop loss, we just had to use a ton of his margin to make up that position size because he was at max leverage. What that means is if you get liquidated, which is more common when you're scalping because you just have that smaller room for error, you now lose 10% of your account. That's a big, significant loss, right? I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys that. And it's a big loss to bounce back from. So getting liquidated, let's put a little scalping at the top here to try and keep things a bit neater. Getting liquidated when you are trading is never a good thing, right? I've heard people talk about using, liquidation as a stop loss. I can tell you guys why I think that's a terrible idea. It's just not a great way of doing things. You essentially give up. You essentially just destroy your risk to reward for no extra benefit. But here you can see, if you get liquidated while you are trading on the higher time frames, if you're not trading at max leverage, you're usually only going to lose about 2.5 times what you were willing to risk. So it's not ideal, but it's not necessarily catastrophic. When you are scalping and you hit max leverage, you are potentially risking a lot more than what you want to be. When you're trying to risk 1% and your stop loss is based at 1%, if the margin required to get you to the position size, because we cannot increase your leverage, the exchange won't let us, so we just have to tie up more margin to make the right position size, that can start to get quite high. And if you get liquidated, which again is more common while scalping, you stand to lose a significant chunk of your account, and then you have to try and bounce back from that. So that is just this is probably the biggest risk with scalping, right? Everything else I've spoken about, slippage and those things, they lead to worse profits, slightly bigger losses usually. This is the real killer. If you get liquidated at max leverage with a ton of your margin tied up, that can put a huge dent in your account. And, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen, if you lose 10% of your account, you actually have to make back, I think it's like 11%, right? To get back to where you were. So you have to make more than you lose. If you lose 10% of your account, it's not 10% that gets you back, because let's say you had $100, you're now at 90. If you make 10% back on 90, you're only at 99. So you actually need to make a little bit extra again to get yourself back to that 100. So losing a significant chunk of your account like that, like getting liquidated with max leverage, can really be something. It can put you into a pretty solid drawdown, and it can be something that's going to take a lot of work to bounce back from.
So there you have it, guys. Hopefully that has shown you why position sizing, and especially leverage, especially those high leverage liquidations, can lead to significantly worse performance, or at least significantly harder performance when you are scalping. Have a great day, happy trading, and I'll talk to you guys very soon.